Hi, and welcome to this new episode of my podcast debut. Today I'm with my friend, actually, Dillon Olias. And Dillon, you've had a podcast for a little bit, so it's more than a debut for you. How many episodes do you have now?
I think 30 now at the time of recording this.
30, congratulations. And it's the second time you're interviewed on a podcast on the other side of the mic. So how
Yeah.
do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice change. You get to experience what the guest feels. Yeah, it's very nice.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for joining. My intention with this podcast in my podcast debut is to just have genuine conversations with people who are either wanting to start a podcast or have started already. And hopefully it helps anyone who's out there thinking of starting their podcast or maybe of taking it to the next level, which I'm sure we can, definitely give them some ideas with that. So yeah, let's just start. Can you tell us a little bit more about your podcast, Dylan?
Yeah. So I started the podcast probably about a year and a half ago now, late October 2023, and originally just mainly on YouTube. Now it's kind of on Spotify as well. I called it Paradigm Pioneers on Spotify. Just it was the first sort of name I could think of because it's kind of like creating a new paradigm, a new worldview. Hopefully, every conversation gives people like a little mindset shift. That's the kind of intention. And yeah, I consumed podcasts for a while before starting the podcast. I'd say Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom, Diary of a CEO, obviously like Joe Rogan a good few years back. People like that they were the first people who put it on the map. I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. It's just conversations. The time seems to fly. And then I got more into like raw foods and health. I remember finding your podcast probably a few months prior. And I think you started a membership group. I think it was the Light Leaders membership group. And I joined that and we had like group calls where it was like Q&A with, you know, health influencers and more conscious spiritual people, so to speak. And that was really fun because I got to ask questions, got a little taste for things. And I remember collaborating with you, talking with you. And I'd been wanting to start a podcast for a while, and we just bounced some ideas off. You gave me some advice, and then I think I started it maybe a month or so after that, maybe late October. I think we did your first call in September. So yeah, it was good. And I'm not a pro, but I watched back one of my first episodes like yesterday, and oh my god, it was so cringy, but it's funny. It's good to see the evolution.
I love that you share that. Yeah, it is often the case, right?
Yeah.
It's like you gotta get started and be okay that at the beginning you're not gonna be a master, but it's just a little bit harder than most things because it's
Yeah.
public.
100%.
Mm. It's interesting what you shared also, but you started the Spotify recently. Like when people think of podcasts, sometimes they think Apple Podcast, and then recently I watch most of my podcasts on YouTube. Like YouTube has become the biggest platform, and I generally recommend to start with that. I like to still have Spotify because it's more for the true fans. Like typically, I'll find stuff on YouTube, but then when I really like something, I go and become a subscriber on
Yeah, same here.
Spotify. And then when I catch a plane or something, I'm like, okay, which 2 hour episode am I going to listen to today on the plane?
Yeah, same here. It's like you say, you kind of discover people on YouTube. YouTube is the biggest search engine and it's got a really powerful algorithm. Then, yeah, if you really like someone, then you download it offline and yeah, they make it into the library.
Yeah. I think it's good to be there on Spotify, at least, maybe on Apple.
Yeah,
But you can still not do it like Gillian Berry. She's crushing it and she's doing only YouTube, even though she has a podcast.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it's not essential. It's just a nice little bonus. Maybe it adds a tiny bit of credibility if you say to a guest, "Oh, it's also on audio platforms." But yeah, I think YouTube, it's mainly where I consume. So yeah, YouTube,
Yeah.
YouTube is the main focus.
Also for credibility, once you're bigger, at least YouTube is nice because Spotify, Apple, the podcast, kind of a black box. People tell you, yeah, I have
Yeah,
that many downloads, but you can't really check.
exactly. Yeah, anyone could be lying. It's yeah, you've got no way of knowing if a podcast is like the number one. Well, you have with the charts, but if you search, it's hard to differentiate maybe. So yeah, people can definitely inflate their numbers.
Yeah, well, on YouTube, I mean, and YouTube is hard to hack too because, for example, on Instagram, I know many people who pay for fake likes and comments, and that can usually help the algorithm. But YouTube's algorithm is also based a lot on how long people watch your video. So, for example, even if I go to 200 friends and be like my video, they'd have to let the video play the whole time. And there might be ways to kind of game the algorithm, but it's much harder than other platforms too.
Yeah, 100%. And what you said there, sometimes it can actually hinder your growth. Like I've said to my friends and family before, don't actually share it if it's not something that you feel like people are interested in, because if they share it, someone clicks on the video, likes it, and then jumps off after 30 seconds, that tells YouTube that it wasn't that interesting. So it's actually a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. And so, has it been your podcast journey now that you're like 30 episodes in? And by the way, before you answer, congratulations, because with 30 episodes, you already have like a pretty good following on YouTube, and you also had epic guests like Dr. Moss in the raw vegan industry, and some episodes that I think are around 10,000 views already, and it's very professional. I mean, even now I interview you, I'm traveling, and you're like in your office with the mic and all that. So yeah, congrats on that. How's it been?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Sometimes I think we can fixate on the setup and things like that. I'm always like, oh, the lighting, there's a shadow on this half of my face. But that doesn't matter too much. As long as you're audible and visual and, you're authentic, that's the main thing. But how's it been? Yeah, it's been good. It's been a mixed journey. I'd say the initial intention was to learn from people because, believe it or not, I was about 30 pounds lighter, so I was very, very skinny, and I wanted to learn how to sort of thrive on like a raw vegan lifestyle because it made intuitive sense to me. But I was like, how do I practically make it work in the modern world and that sort of thing? So it was the diet lens, and I wanted to learn and learn from people who had spent decades doing it so I could save myself the time, but also help others by just asking questions I was genuinely interested in, knowing that there's a lot of other people with the same questions. And then I had maybe a period of like a couple months where I wanted to take it full time, like, you know, um, monetize it, which I think for some people is great. But for me, knowing myself and my goals and my personality, it kind of took the fun out of it for me. And I was like, okay, maybe it's better for me personally as a passion project, where some people they can, like Chris Williamson, he says 3 episodes a week, that he's committed to that schedule. Maybe he has guests on that maybe 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 he's interested in, and he has them on. And for some people, I think that's better, getting high reps and volume in. So for me, it's been good. It's been fun. Been following my curiosity. I'd say I've had one or two guests on who I didn't resonate with fully, but I think it's a sign of a mature mind when you can still have a conversation with someone who potentially you don't agree 100% with. So yeah, it's been a good journey. It's been
Yeah.
great for personal growth and development and networking as well, because I've made some really good friends from it, and I'm sure I'll meet up with some of these people in the real world and actually forge like stronger relationships with them. So yeah, it's ticked a lot of boxes, and I'm still very early on in the journey. So who knows where it'll be in 5, 10 years.
Mm, yeah, that's cool. And I love what you share, leading with curiosity. I think energetically, it's what feels the best for a podcast is when you feel people are really curious, like the host is really curious and they have a good conversation rather than necessarily like ticking boxes or doing it because it's successful. And paradoxically, that's where it becomes successful. I know we've been um, both of us on a journey on nutrition, on the raw vegan diet, and yeah, a lot of the podcasts I've had also on the light leaders has just been okay. I really want to have a conversation with that person, and first for that person to accept and not charge me a lot of money or just to
Yeah, yeah,
accept, it would need to be an energy exchange in the way of a podcast. And two, if we're going to have that conversation, might as well broadcast it and have sometimes tens of thousands of people also enjoy that conversation. So, but I love leading with the curiosity. And it's also echoing what you said with the studio and all this. Of course, you don't want it to be like really crappy audio, but now I'm traveling, for example. Yeah, it's okay. With Dr. Morse, I just had a white wall and I have my clip mic, and people want the genuine conversation, the authenticity more than they need the fancy studio. And then you can add the fancy studio and the nice things on top. It's like cherry on the cake. But yeah, it's not the most important, but unfortunately, it's often what stops people.
100%. Yeah, I think productive procrastination and perfectionism, I'm very guilty of it sometimes. I'm getting better, but I was the kind of guy who'd research like for 2 hours on the best, washing up sponge or something like that. So you got to be careful you don't allow that to stop you from taking action. So yeah,
It's interesting also what you shared about taking the fun out, because I find it's a little bit of both. Like on one hand, it pushes to professionalize. So actually, when I started the podcast coaching, and it wasn't my experience that a lot of my successful podcasts, they were just Zoom recordings. And then you just started, for example, and you were using Riverside. But sometimes when you're new to something, you actually start with a blank sheet, so
yeah,
you can get the best tools. And I was used to how I was doing. But then that becoming a coach now, I'm always feeling, okay, what's the new things? What the later things? So it is a motivation, but it can add a bit of pressure. But I found that with everything, right? When I was
of
doing
course.
health coaching, I was like, oh, now I feel like I have to look a certain way, and it was motivating, but it was also putting
Yeah,
that pressure. When I'm doing a little bit more business coaching, I feel like, am I good enough?
yeah,
And starting to compare. Yeah, with the podcast, for example, for better or worse, I started comparing more, and
yeah,
being like, oh, is that good enough now that I'm a coach? And some people might say, oh, well, you're a podcast coach, but you have Zoom recordings, or it's not
yeah,
that
yeah,
good, or these kind of things.
yeah. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because like it's a great quality when you do compare and you're always trying to optimize and as long I think comparing yourself to yourself from maybe a year ago is handy because that way you've got a baseline and then you're like, okay, last year I was here, this year I can clearly see I've got better because we're all on our own journeys. But yeah, I agree, especially because like now I'm doing health coaching. Let's say I look a bit tired under the eyes or you have a pimple come up, you're like, oh, I don't really want to record because some people are going to be like, oh, you know, but I think that's good because you want to practice what you preach. You want to be a good example. And that's great because there's a lot of people out there on the internet who sometimes you meet them on a podcast and you realize behind the scenes, they're like someone totally different to when you get them on the podcast. So some people aren't as genuine.
Thank you for watching. If you're here, it probably means you're interested to grow a high impact podcast. And I hear you. It's brought so much into my life over the past 7 years. And I'm now passionate about helping other conscious leaders grow theirs, so we can flood the internet with insightful and empowering content. If you have any comments or questions or feedback, leave a comment below. I read and reply to all of them. And if you feel like I may be able to help you with your podcast journey, get in touch. I have a community of impact-driven podcasters, and I support conscious leaders one-on-one also to help them with their podcast, from training them to working as an agency, so you can focus on the fun part, which is to show up and speak. So check out the links in the description and maybe speak to you soon. Much love and enjoy the rest of this episode.
Like some people say, don't meet your heroes. Some people live up to it, and that shows true character. But there are some people you might talk to, you might have on your podcast, and you think, you know what, they're not actually how I imagine them to be. So it's great because you get to know people at a deeper level. It's it's been really good.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because personally, I've had some people on the podcast to learn from them, but also I think it's really good to have mentors, like people who inspire us. But sometimes when you don't have deep conversations with people and just through Instagram reels, you can look a certain way, but then when you speak to them, there's something where you're like, I feels a little bit off. So it's actually really nice when I have people who inspire me, whether it's in health, in relationship, and if they are within reach, I want to have them on the podcast, conversation with them, and usually it gives me more clues about other people I want more walk in their footprints in a way and learn from.
Yeah, 100%. I think that was definitely the motivation at the start of my journey, more so. I still think it's really good to have mentors. I think, especially when getting from that 0 to 1, getting going, you do need some mentor. Even if they're one step ahead of you, it's better than nothing. Sometimes that's actually better if you've got someone who's maybe a level 5 and you're a level 0. That might be better because someone who's a level 10, let's say Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett's coaching people how to start a podcast. He's not going to be as relatable as you. That he's not going to give the advice for a beginner who's thinking, "Oh, I'm scared to get on camera. What if I mess up? What software do I use? What questions do I ask? What do I do before the podcast, after the podcast?" All these things that maybe Stephen Bartlett, he just lets his team do it, whereas someone like you is actually in the trenches. So it's important, like you say, find mentors who are maybe only a few levels above you. I think it can be maybe more helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like if you're learning golf, do you really want Tiger Woods to be your teacher?
Yeah,
He might
exactly.
be too far off.
Exactly.
And what's been your best podcast episode?
Ooh, I don't know. It's
You
in
can
terms
select
of
a few.
yeah. In terms of views, I think actually some of my first ones, that's actually the benefit of YouTube. It compounds. So a video might pick up 3 years later, 5 years later. So one of my first ones with Orville Douglas, he's like a fruitarian, 60-year-old guy, looks pretty good for his age, pretty fit. That's got nearly 10,000 views. And that was a good sign because it kind of gave me a little bit of motivation and momentum. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm actually half decent at this, maybe keep going. And that was one of the first ones. But yeah, having Dr. Morse on was great, especially because with him, because he was a bigger guest, I think I arranged it in maybe September, October for January, which is quite far in advance. But yeah, that was nice. So yeah, had plenty of good ones. But sometimes small guests can be great as well because you don't expect a lot, so your expectations are lower, but maybe they really surprise you, or maybe you make a friend. So I've learned not to write people off, and just because someone has a small audience, you can still learn something from everyone. So every episode has been amazing too. I want to say that. There's yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, of course, we can sometimes expect this is going to do well or not. And now that I've become a bit more intentional and professional with my podcast, I lay a little bit more on the side of, okay, who's going to be a great guest? Yes, I'm curious, but also
Yeah,
that's going to be a catchy title, and we're going to be able to promote this way, and we're going to like shape the conversation in a way that's going to get more views, and we can play with that. But ultimately, there's so many variables that we're going to have a lot of surprises. So it's that balance between also just going for it and having the conversations. Like, for example, the conversation we're having now, we didn't prepare so much, but I feel it's really nice. It's really good and it's flowing really well.
100%. I think it's hard to appreciate when you're watching, but when you actually have these conversations, the time flies. There's been times where I'm like an hour in and I'm looking and there's so many things I want to ask, and I just try to drag it out a little bit, but I'm trying to be respectful of the audience's time. And then it ends up being like a 2.5 hour episode. So it does fly quickly, which is a good sign. If you are getting that feeling when you have these conversations, it means you're in the flow state. It means you're in that element, you're in the present moment, which is great. It's
Yeah.
definitely a common
Now,
experience.
tend to adapt a bit also to who I'm speaking to. So, for example, when I have Dr. Moss, or like we've had Lou Corona, both of us recently, I'm like, if they want to stay 4 hours, I'm going to stay 4 hours, no
Yeah,
problem. With some people, I feel I want to interview them 40 minutes on a specific topic, and I actually don't feel it's going to be as beneficial that we go too much on like
yeah,
tangents and rants and things like this. So I think with the experience, and that's more like advanced level, I feel it's good to have an eye for sometimes yeah, going Joe Rogan style, let's sit down. Uh, I know you've had Luke Corona recently too. We're both about to release the interview with him, and I wanted to go in so many directions. I really had to pick, and also he tends to give longer answers. So I've had all these questions. I'm like, now I want to ask you about breatharianism, and I want to ask you
Yeah.
uh, more about like the physical part, um, and yeah, it can be hard to track that. What's your what you let's say if someone wants to grow a high impact podcast, like they want to make the world better through a podcast, and either they already have one, but they're more like doing it here and there, or they're thinking of starting one. What do you feel is the best piece of advice?
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it down to one, but I'd say initially you have to get clear on your why and your intention. So you've got to know why you want to do it and what your intention is. Because if you're doing it for certain intentions and certain reasons, it's not going to keep you going. It's not going to be strong enough. And the audience can sense it. If you're being inauthentic and it's obvious you're just hosting a podcast just to market yourself, you don't care about the guest. The guest might as well be like a mannequin and they're just there and you're trying to steal the spotlight as the host. It's a delicate balance. So if you've got great intentions, like you want to make the world a better place, but maybe you also want to earn money, maybe you want to build a brand, maybe you want that authority in your niche, I think that's great. That there's nothing wrong with having like more selfish intentions, because often when we develop ourselves, we make the world a better place. So there's nothing wrong with that. But I think getting clear on your intention and your why is super important, because without a strong why, you're just going to flip flop. You'll get the shiny object syndrome. Maybe you'll start a drop shipping store next week. And it's having a why with anything, whether it's health and fitness, business, podcast, I think super important. And for me personally, when I maybe lost sight of my why, the podcast hasn't been as good, and maybe people can tell that in your energy, because we're such spiritual beings. We know at a deeper level when someone's being authentic and when someone's just changing their persona to suit a certain agenda. So I think just be yourself, have a clear intention, have a clear why. It's gonna set the stage, and then yeah, you can learn from there. Once you've got a few episodes under your belt, it gets a lot easier. And every episode, if you make it 1% better, that definitely adds up.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I'd say now I was reflecting on what you were saying, and definitely have your why. And if I had two pieces of advice, one would be the why. And when I work with clients, that's actually what I start with all the time. And the other one is just do it. Just
Yeah,
get the reps in, because the that's basically the two types. And usually I work with people who are a little bit more like, okay, I really want to have a high impact podcast, let's do it. And that's more the type of people who are going to join our community or work with a coach because they want to go to the next level. But for people who are more in the, like, before committing, you want to date. And I think sometimes it's hard to know your why when you haven't had that dating phase with podcasting. And it can be easy things. You could do Instagram lives instead of having a podcast, or you could really just like start with your phone and don't overthink the why, and just be like, you know what, I want to talk with these 5 people. We're going to record on Zoom. Like, don't even get Riverside. Like, just go on Zoom, record a conversation, put it up. Don't think about the title and the thumbnail too much. And then after that, for those people, maybe after those 5-10 episodes, they're like, oh, what do I like? What don't I like? And then also refining, playing with the why. So it's almost like those two things, with being intentional, but also just doing it and refining your intention as you do it. It's almost kind of a little dance there.
100%. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think if you've got to convince someone that starting a podcast is a good idea, like let's say they've heard, oh, Joe Rogan's got a podcast, Diary of a CEO's got a podcast. That's the trendy thing to do. I don't think they're going into it with the right intention. Whereas, like you say, if they're like, yeah, I want a high impact podcast. I listen to podcasts. I watch podcasts. I personally got value from it. It's something I'm really interested in. I think you're going to do a lot better, because you've got that childlike curiosity. You've got the love for it. you at least know a little bit about it. You've already got a unique advantage. Even if you listen to a podcast once a week, you're going to be better off than someone, like some 60-year-old who's never consumed podcasts, but they want to grow their business. It's going to be harder for them because they don't really know what it looks and feels like. Whereas if you create where you consume, if you watch a lot of YouTube podcasts like this one, you're probably going to already have that unique advantage. And I'm sure if you work with someone like that, it's going to be a lot easier to get them results.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And at the same time, I think we'll see a lot of that profile, the 60-year-old
Yeah,
business owner, start a podcast without being into podcasts, a little bit like, many businesses started having an Instagram, even if they weren't so
yeah.
much on Instagram, just because it became a thing. And I think podcasting for businesses and YouTube for businesses is going to be
Oh, it can
like
be
more and
huge.
more mainstream, to advertise your services. But yeah, it is good to know your why, and then it's going to be a different approach, right? If you, I think it's totally fine to let's say you have a brand and you're going to want to grow that brand, and then your podcast is going to be in support of growing the brand. And then you're probably going to be more niche with your podcast. You're probably going to be very intentional about what's the outcome you want from those podcasts. Maybe you have a budget, you want ROI, and that's perfectly fine. And then some people might just be like, I just want to follow my curiosity, and that's amazing too. Yeah, but it's just good to know. Do you do it to grow a brand? Do you do it to learn? Do you do it to break through on speaking online? That self-expression, this is in itself such a beautiful intention.
100%. Like you say, there's so many different intentions. That's the beautiful thing with podcasts. You can use it to grow your brand and authority. You can use it to learn. You can monetize it. You can network, meet friends. There's a lot of benefits. And I think perhaps that business owner or someone who's a bit older, they might need a bit more help because, from someone like yourself or whoever who has that more, they know a lot more about podcasts. They know more about the software. Because I know for a lot of people, they're very put off because they think they've got to edit it, they've got to do all this extra work. But I think people will be surprised. Like if you get the right guidance or the right things to do, it doesn't actually take that many hours. Like I don't know how many hours you say for clients, but you could probably do it in a few hours a week.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but for something fairly basic, honestly, we both use Riverside, and then we record on this. It's almost like auto-edited. So this, when I'm do my podcast debut, often it can be like 40 minutes, honestly, 45 minutes, and then it's on YouTube already and it's done. Then it's interesting because when you have a really good piece of content, let's say for example, the interview with Lou Corona, I'm really thinking through what titles, what thumbnail, what intro, because on YouTube, if you make your video 10% better, especially at the beginning, title, thumbnail, it can get like 10 times the views. And so that's more advanced strategy. So when you start, I don't think you should bother too much about that. It's more about getting the reps, doing a lot of podcasts, understanding what you want, what you like. But then in the stage, and then I'll be curious where you are, but in the stage where I'm at least, I keep following my curiosity. I keep wanting to do things in the flow and nice. Especially when I feel that could be a really good video, I'm like, okay, I'm going to put the extra work, a few extra hours to get this video from 2,000 to 20,000, or from 1,000 to 10,000. And then it's worth it because I'm also impact driven with it, and I'm probably going to have return on investment in the form of people joining my coaching. Yeah. So, what are you like right now in July 2025? Where do you want to go with the podcast?
Um, yeah, it's a difficult one because my curiosity is always changing. But I'd say like if it was a long-term vision, maybe 5-10 years time, I'd love to have an in-person podcast. I think there's an even greater level of connection. This is still perfect. Like remote podcasting has come on leaps and bounds. Like, back in the day it was probably Skype or something like that. Now you've got Riverside. But I'd say an in-person podcast and probably a bit more general. I think at the minute I'm more niche because I think when you start out, perhaps more niche is interesting. But then once you become more credible, once you become more interested in yourself, then like Joe Rogan, Stephen Bartlett, Chris Williamson, you can have on whoever because they're just interested in you, and they just become interested in things just because you are. It's funny. So maybe in 5, 10 years time, I'll have people like Tony Robbins or whoever like in person. That would be awesome. For now, it's just sort of following curiosities, keeping it niche, and yeah, the sky's the limit. I think I've set big goals and future visions for myself before, but then something shifts like that in my life, and I'm a completely different human. So very hard to say, but I'd definitely say a more in-person approach and more general guess, I think, in all areas of maybe personal development, spirituality, business, everything really.
I love that. And I think it's fine to have goals sometimes that are very specific or sometimes that aren't, depending on who you are, where you're at. So some people might be like, okay, I want 100,000 subscribers. Let's work towards that. And some people might be like, I just want to have fun and I just want to put any number because that's going to stress me out. And that's not, it comes back to the intention, right? And, but yeah, sometimes it can be certain guests indeed. And there's something I like also is that, of course, as my podcast grow, maybe I'll have Tony Robbins on my podcast. But sometimes when I have a podcast with someone, I'm thinking maybe in 20 years they'll be Tony Robbins. They've been on my
Yeah,
podcast 20 years before, which could be fun. So
yeah,
sometimes I'm having interviews with people where I'm thinking yeah, this guy or this woman is amazing, and I think in 10, 15 years they'll be like even so much more like famous and all that, that it's an honor to have them on the podcast now.
yeah. That's a great point. That's a great point. If you can see the potential in someone, if you resonate with their message, then yeah, like you say, you're the first one they spoke to before they blew up. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing.
Maybe in 15 years from now in the comments there'll be like like crazy amount of comments be like,
Yeah.
Alex, can't believe you had Dillon before he blew up.
Yeah, maybe vice versa as well. It's like Mr. Beast, isn't it? Have you seen some of his older videos where it's like
Yeah.
my note to myself in 3 years or something?
It's a law of attraction with public accountability.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that is another great point as well. You just touched on their public accountability, because it's hard. A lot of people don't want to do it because they're scared of the hate and they're scared of like trolls and people like that. But it's never personal. If you get a hate comment, it's indicative of the state that person's in, their level of consciousness, and where they're at in their life right then. And a lot of these people, without being rude to them, no offense, but they haven't even got profile pictures. They haven't made any videos themselves. So they're just projecting how they're feeling. It's highlighting, it's like a mirror. It's highlighting where they're at right there and then. So just, yeah, keep going. Like, those people's opinion don't matter. You know, opinions are healthy, like your friends, your family. Some people do want the best for you, and maybe there's an element of truth. If something does offend you, there might be an element of truth there. That's maybe why it's offending you. And if you have that growth mindset, you can say, okay, I am going to work on that. I was maybe talking too much, and or maybe I didn't talk enough, and it was just a monologue, my episode. Maybe next episode I can be a bit better. Because for me personally, I'm a bit of a people pleaser. I know I'm talking a lot here, but in some of my podcasts, I just sit a bit too quietly, which it might as well just be like a talking head video for my guests. So it's fine. It's knowing yourself and knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and maybe by working with someone like you'd be able to spot that, someone objective, and help someone develop those strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, thank you. And sometimes the work we do indeed is to watch the episode, but it is something really hard to watch yourself on video, especially and talking. It is definitely a personal development exercise. And I love what you add when there's hate comments. Yeah, it says about them, but also whether it triggers me or not says something about me, right? Because
Yeah,
you can't like if you put salt and there's no wound, it doesn't hurt.
yeah,
It only hurts if
yeah.
there's
It's
a
a good
wound
analogy.
already. So it's a good yeah, it's a good test for it for sure. And it's funny because I've had some episodes where I'm interviewing someone and one comment's gonna be like, I love the interview, I love that you kept it active. And the next comment is the host is so annoying, he keeps interrupting.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's personal preference. Everyone likes different things. You've got some people who love super hyper podcasts, other people like more chill, just like a casual conversation. That's what makes the world go around. It's The world would be a bit boring if everyone was the same.
Yes, yes. And as part of my course, I get people to look at different inspirations. And yeah, some podcasts are very successful. So if you take Joe Rogan, for example, there's barely an intro. He doesn't play the YouTube game. There's no thumbnail. There's just the guy, and the title is the name of the guy interviewed, and they go live
Yeah,
and they go for 2 or 3 hours. And what people love is the authenticity. And then Diary of a CEO has like they have a whole team that works on the right intro to make it catchy and all this, and they're doing really well too. So you can always find examples, and then it's like, what's your style? What's your vibe? What's your
yeah,
dopeness?
100%. And you can take little bits from everyone. Be like Bruce Lee. Just don't be married to one way. Super dogmatic. You can take bits. Maybe you like Alex's chill energy. Maybe you like a more sort of edited podcast. I don't know what people like, but like you say, if you find inspiration, I'm sure that's a big thing. Like you mentioned, just getting people to create something that they actually would want to consume themselves, I think is huge. Because if you watch podcasts and you get tired of the host interrupting, maybe you want to be a host where you're just a bit more laid back. And yeah, who would you say are like your biggest inspirations for podcasting in general?
Well, the person that got me into it is more Tim Ferriss, because I love his curiosity and wanting to learn, and I started there. But now I would say more Joe Rogan, because I tend to prefer now a style where the host is a little more present. And so again, it's different styles, but that's also what I say to people: is being a podcast host doesn't mean you're just going to ask a list of 10 questions. And because otherwise, what's the point of a podcast? You might as well listen to a masterclass if it's just those 10 points that that the guest is always talking about on every podcast.
Yeah,
So with someone like Joe Rogan, I feel, but sometimes I do it with other hosts also. I feel the host is going to really add something there, because they add their own personality, their own expertise. Maybe they're going to challenge the guest a little bit more.
mm,
And that's what I tell people and clients and friends when they start a podcast is, yeah, you kind of have a conversation. For example, right now we're having almost a 50-50 conversation, right? And that's what I wanted. But it can depend on the episode also. So the intention can be for the whole podcast and YouTube channel, but you can have a different intention for an episode. Like sometimes I go into an episode being like, okay, I'm going to have Dr. Morse, Olukorana, the mentor. I just want to listen and ask questions. And with some other people, I might be like, yeah, I want to have a friendly conversation and have with a friend and people to witness that, like we're having now.
100%. Yeah, like you say, going back to that intention and that why is so important before you do anything in life. That's helped me. Like, what do I actually want to get out of this? What am I looking to achieve? And that's not saying that you want to put your life in a box and you want to just be super scripted and structured. It's really helpful for me personally, just having that intention, because then you have a clear direction. You're like, oh, okay, I'm going a little bit off course here. We started talking about aliens, but I wanted to talk about health. So, let's get back on track. So yeah, it's also what you touched on with the structure. How like I think like Chris Williamson, sometimes he'll have his iPad, he'll have you know 18 lessons for this or that, and each one he wants the guest to talk about, which might be great for him. He's a super structured guy, but maybe some people they just like to see where the conversation goes. Maybe they pick up that their guest, they seemed a bit emotional on that point. Maybe I'll dig a little bit deeper. Or maybe if you're a host who doesn't want to get deeper, you could just move on to the next point. That's, I guess, where we can show our uniqueness.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I think we've gone pretty deep today, Dylan, and time is flying by already.
I know.
So yeah, but we can do more. That's also when we have good conversations with podcasts. Like, you don't always need to have everything in one episode. We can always do more.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure. I'd love to ask you to conclude this episode. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
No, I think we covered a lot. I'd say, yeah, I don't know about with the audience, but I'd like to say thank you to you personally, because it is important to give credit to people. There's nothing wrong with being like humble, and if people have helped you, then I think that's important. I think it was great to be a part of your original community, and I think it's just good to be around people who are doing the thing you want to do or have similar interests. It's in my life that's been the best thing, whether it's been joining a football team or certain communities for business or podcasting. That's when I've made my most rapid development and growth, because we are the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So if your current people aren't getting you the results you want, whether that's within health, relationships, business, then perhaps it's time for us all to find like a better support network, myself included. I'm always looking for positive people to surround myself with, and I think podcasting is a great vehicle to do that. If you don't have these people in your life, maybe friends locally, maybe you live somewhere remote, a nice small village, maybe you can meet these people virtually and then attract them in real life. Like, you live in Bali, I live in the UK. Yeah, with the power of the internet, we've been able to connect, and I'm sure we'll meet up in person very soon. So yeah, it's powerful.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dillon. And yeah, right now I'm in Germany with my partner. We're visiting family. And yeah, I do miss a little bit like-minded, like-hearted people, let's say. As it's been really nice also just to have that conversation, and also to be able to broadcast it. Dillon, you're going to be part of our Impact Podcast Lab weekly call on Thursday, also sharing about your experience with our students in the community. And you're part of the community. We're all students there. That's why I wanted to do it as a community, is because we all have things to teach each other.
100%.
Yeah, that's something we have that I love also. It's like I'm looking forward to be with other light leaders, with other conscious leaders who do their podcasts and learn with each other. So it's more fun also to do it this way. So I look forward to having you also on our weekly calls.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I look forward to being there, and I think that's great what you've done. If you can't necessarily find a community, you create it yourself and attract the people who like you for your authentic self. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to being there on Thursday.
Thank you, Dillon, and thank you everyone for watching. Much love.
Much love, everyone. Take care.